Hey guys, welcome back to the From Mourning to Meaning Summit, where we are learning how to break through intolerable grief and return to meaningful living. I'm Laura Isabel, and today I have with me author of the book, Why Did She Jump? You probably know her from appearances on Oprah or international podcasts. She is a licensed clinical social worker and a grief coach, a certified grief coach. I have Joni Childs. Thank you so much for joining us, Joni.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I
Of
appreciate
course,
it.
of course. Awesome. Now, I know that you've wrote more than just this one book. Um, you're actually a life coach in general, but you do some work with grieving. And I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about that and see what your story behind that was and what brought you to write the book, Why Did She Jump?
Well, I am a certified grief therapist, counselor.
Oh,
And
therapist.
so
Sorry about
I'm
that.
only making that distinction because there's a lot of more work involved in therapy than there is in coaching. Although
Hmm.
I'm also a coach, so it's nice that you were able to mention that. So the book, Why Did She Jump? And I have a picture. I have the book right in front of me. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right up here.
Yeah.
Okay, so the history of this it goes a long way. I had five children, and the oldest was Pam, and Pam developed but with what we know as bipolar disorder one, which we have a spectrum of bipolar. We have bipolar one, bipolar two, and they're even adding bipolar three and four. So it's a spectrum. It's kind of like the spectrum for autism. It
Oh,
starts
wow.
minimally and it depends, and it's one of the most difficult clinical issues or clinical diagnoses to make because it has what we call so much comorbidity. So many other mental illnesses are similar to bipolar, and many psychiatrists would say that to make it what we call a differential diagnosis, which means what makes it that and not something else, it can take up to 10 years. And that's what it did for Pam. Um, Pam was 34 years old when she leaped to her death from a 15-story window. And I don't really believe, I never believed, and I never will believe that it was her choice. I think she was in a delusional system at the time. And I really think her executioner was her illness, bipolar disorder one. So, it's against nature to die before your parents. The children should not be dead before their parents pass. So that was one issue that I had to deal with.
Yeah.
Uh, I we were in shock. I wasn't even in the city when it happened. When I say the city where she lived, and she lived, she was staying with her father and her father's girlfriend, and I was in North Carolina with my two other daughters. We had been exhausted from caregiving as we were switching around with me, and but when her delusionary system became really severe, she said she saw demons around me and she didn't want to stay with me. So she went to live with her sisters, and her illness was so difficult to contain and to take care of because of the medications, number one, which I don't know if she took them like she's supposed to. And if she did, the effects of the meds were so bad. She was what they would call treatment resistant in our field, meaning that whatever they attempted, whatever they gave her, never really worked effectively. And
Oh,
so she was hospitalized numerous times. I would say to you at least 12 to 15 times during the course of the 10 years, the from the time she was 24 years old till she was 34, when it really kicked in. Up until then, it was noticeable that she was having problems. What it looked more like personality issues, personality disorders. And in the beginning, when she was a teenager, it looked like she was just spoiled and rebellious.
mhm.
We had no clue what was going on. And when she graduated college and went on to her getting her master's, she never came home. She went to New York first and worked for the Monsignor, working in a drug therapeutic environment where she was dealing with rehabilitation and drug and alcohol issues, recovery. She stayed there for about a year, And she bolted out of there and went out to LA. I guess this is typical of teenagers. They grow up in a city, they want to go to New York when they graduate, and they want to go to LA after that. That seems to be the course for many, many. In
Yeah.
LA, she got a wonderful position with John Bradshaw, who really was the golden boy of recovery. And it was through her that I met him and that I became his first affiliate in the United States. I brought him to South Florida and at one of the convention centers, and uh, 4,000 people in recovery showed up. And we were kind of stunned. So he was only there for 4 days, and there had to be a follow up from, because it's like going to surgery and being opened, and nobody closes you up. So we arranged to have many. I'm getting a little off the issue of Pam, but it was important because she was his head therapist. He called her a wizard therapist. She was brilliant, and she somehow drew the lightning to herself. And I think part of that was because of the bipolar. She
Mm.
had she had a little bit of recklessness in her, and it was clear to me that she didn't respect defense mechanisms as much as I did in my practice, and I was scared that she blitzed through them. But they were in a safe environment when you're in a, in a closed uh, uh, inpatient setting, so that if anything would happen, they were safe. But still, some of her bipolar kicked into the fact that she took risks that I would have never taken, and watching her. And we had done a lot of work together. She and we had a retreat I had a home up in North Carolina, a cabin, and we would bring some of her clients and some of mine. We would do a 4-day retreat, and we did an amazing job. I mean, the work was sensational and so, so transformational. People just changed their lives in those 4 days. And then we followed up. She did with them when they went back to California, and I did when they went back to Florida. So she was amazing. She was a wizard therapist, and not just by John, by just about everybody till today, 21 years after she passed. I'm still getting letters and cards and phone calls and emails from some of her patients that she healed. So I guess when you're a little crazy, you do risky business, and sometimes it works out very effectively. And she was just amazing, but she was sick. And they speak the recovery center, John Bradshaw's, where he was the center, they recognized that she was a little bit off base, somewhat bizarre in her behavior, and they were afraid of what the clients might, how they might react. So she was relieved. She was fired basically, and immediately went into private practice in Long Beach, California, and in Santa Monica. And everybody followed her. She was like a Pied Piper. But her illness was beginning to really emerge. So her behaviors were bizarre. And I mean, she received more than 400 traffic tickets that she never paid. And she started having hallucinations, both visual and auditory. And she had a belief system that we could not break, and that was that she believed that the devil was going to take her soul. So I could go on and on the whole hour and a half with her behaviors, but I don't really think it's going to be as important as how her family, myself, her father, and her siblings, and her close friends and family members, extended family members, her clients, how they reacted to this sudden, unexpected tragedy. And it is every parent's worst nightmare, not only to lose a child, but to lose them through suicide. And not know. And we had no clue. There was not even a note that she wrote. That's one of the reasons, because that I never believed that Pam intended to do that. I think it was a delusionary demand that threw her out the window. Either her belief system was that she believed that the devil was going to take her soul.
Yeah.
And no matter what we did to try to convince her that that was a delusionary belief system,
Yeah.
that was because of her illness, she could not escape it. She would talk to me with a lot of like as if she was very lucid at times and say, I know it sounds crazy, Mom, and I know that, you know, that you think I'm crazy, and maybe I am, but I'm telling you, I know this to be true. And I would say, how do you know this to be true? She said, because I've seen the other side. And I said, what's the other side? And she said, you know, where the devil lives. Anyway, it was bizarre and it was scary, but she had a deep rooted belief system. So my daughters, who were also taking care of her because of the fact that she thought that I had demons around me, she would visualize them. And I was going to work full time at the time. I was seeing around 20 clients a week. Plus, I had a group, and I had six. Oh my God, six! I can't believe I did this. Six offices in 3 different counties and 17 therapists working for me. They had all
Wow.
been to the Bradshaw workshop, and I quickly had them. I trained them. He came in and trained them with his trainer, and to be able to do his work because he was known as the inner child work expert. I had to include some of this in the story so you'd understand. You know, she was a brilliant, beautiful psychotherapist. She had a PhD, and
Yeah.
I'm in the field, and her father's a doctor. And with all, you know, the king's horses and all the king's men, we couldn't put her back together again. It was just one of those things that
Yeah.
nothing worked. I
Of
could
course.
tell you story upon story, but I'm going to try to see if I can tell you about the grief. And please stop me if I'm rambling because I have so much to say. But
No, no problem. But definitely let's get to the grief part just so people, I'm so happy that you shared the story because that way people can definitely understand
yeah,
where it came from. But I know you mentioned that when it first happened, you went through a phase of shock. And I would like you to explain that phase of
yeah.
shock because a lot of people might go through this, but they don't really understand that they're going through it. So what exactly is this phase of shock and how did you experience it?
Well, I'm really glad. It's a great question. I'm glad you asked me. I was in North Carolina after traveling for 2 days from Wisconsin. I was visiting someone. We were traveling together to North Carolina. It should have taken maybe 12 to 14 hours. It ended up because of detours and all kinds of issues with the travel that we didn't get there till midnight. And this is where the shock occurred. And if you know anything about the Blue Ridge Mountains at night, you can't see them. And it's the curves are they're like pin nail or nail pin turns. They're very, very curvy. And I had to go to the rental office to get the keys to this cabin that I had rented. Got there after midnight, so of course they were closed, and they left a big sign on the door of the rental office that said, "Call Dr. Glassman." That was her father, who she was staying with, or call Marlene, who was my secretary. You have an emergency. Well, I didn't know what the emergency was exactly. Of course, I thought of her, but what happened was it also said your keys to your car are at the police station, which was about, I don't know, maybe 50 yards away from the rental, where they rented the cabin. So when they said that, I thought of my other daughter who was driving up in my car from Miami. I was driving somebody else's truck or van. So I thought maybe she had an accident, not Pam, but the other one. When I got to the police station and I said, I understand my keys to my car are here. And he said, no, they're not. And I couldn't understand. I got confused. And the police said to me, you need to call Dr. Glassman, which was my ex-husband, her father, or Marlene. You have an emergency. So in those days, this was back in 1998. We didn't have cell phones yet. There was a phone booth outside of the police station, and they kind of gave me instructions to go use it, the phone booth. I picked up the phone and I called her father, where she was staying while we were going to North Carolina, her sisters and myself, but we rented 2 different cabins because her sisters brought 2 of their friends. So we had our own cabins, maybe about 20 minutes apart from each other. And this is important. So I want to talk about this shock. So I went to the telephone booth and dialed his number, and I hear him and he doesn't sound, hello, I can hear right away something's upsetting him. And I immediately said, don't give me any bad news. That was my first response. And he said, I'm going to give you probably the worst news you have ever heard in your lifetime. Pammy killed herself this morning. That's what he said. She jumped out of my window. Well, shock has a physiological component, a big one. It's when, it's kind of like some people faint. I fainted, by the way. I was with someone who kind of caught me. And when I heard that she had died, because it was not expected, I had just spoken to her 2 nights before while she was at her father's. And I called her from Wisconsin and I said, just checking in, how you doing? She said, oh, one day at a time, Mom, it's tough, but I'm okay. And I said, listen, I have something I need to ask you. It was a premonition on some level that I wasn't conscious of. I said, I have to ask you something that is not easy for me to ask you, but I need to know if now that I'm away and your sisters are away and you're staying with your father and his girlfriend, I'm just worried, because I know you're in a very precarious position. But I just need to know if you ever thought about suicide. And she was so convincing. This is when she was lucid. And she said, Mom, I don't want you to ever think that I would ever kill myself. And I'm going to tell you why. She said, number one, she said, I would never, never leave a legacy like that to you and Daddy and my brothers and sisters. We had 5 children. She was the oldest. She said that I would never do something like that. And number 2, she said, I have this belief system that you tell me is crazy, but I have it anyway, that the devil's going to take my soul. If I kill myself, it's like giving my soul to the devil, and that I would never do. And the third reason is I'm Jewish, and we don't believe in suicide. So she tried to convince me, and I hung up the phone, but I didn't feel assured. I had like this mother's intuition. So I called her psychiatrist in Miami, who I had seen with her many times. So she was able to share. It was not confidential any longer because we had been in the sessions together, mother and daughter. And her name was Carol. And I said, Carol, I'm away for a month. And I don't feel comfortable leaving Pam with her father, even though he's a doctor. He doesn't understand what mental illness is all about. He just thinks like, she'll get a grip, she'll be fine, don't worry, don't make a big deal out of this. That's the way he handled it, only because he really didn't know how bad it was. And of course, as a parent, you don't want to know how bad it is. So he had selective, listening. Anyway, I spoke to her psychiatrist and I said, listen, do me a favor. She's going to see you on Thursday. This was Tuesday night, only 2 days later. She's going to see you. She has an appointment. Do me a favor and hospitalize her, because I'm afraid that she is really, even though I don't have any evidence, I'm scared of suicide. And she said, well, this goes now to our substandard health system in the United States. She said her insurance won't cover her for psychosis. And she's not suicidal, at least the last time I saw her, which was last week. She's psychotic, but she's not suicidal. But I'll check it out when I see her on Thursday. And I said, listen, you may not think she's suicidal, but if she's psychotic, she may have a delusionary demand and throw herself out of a window or something. I just said it as if I knew it was going to happen without knowing I knew. So she said, I'm going to see her tomorrow or Thursday, and I'll let you know what's going on. Well, long story short, she never made it. She threw herself out of the window that Thursday morning at 11 o'clock. She had the appointment at 1 o'clock. Anyway, when he told me that she had died and she had killed herself in the phone booth, I don't know whether I fainted or I collapsed, but my whole body just went into a state of, I had no control over it, none whatsoever. And everything reacted to the news that I was listening to. So I sort of collapsed and I felt sick. I felt like I felt like somebody took a sword. This is how it felt physically, that somebody took a sword and put it inside me, and it went up through my head like a pain in my gut, and then it went through my head, and I was really unstable, and that's how I fell backwards. And the person I was with said, you're going to be okay, don't worry. And I said, take me to the hospital. There's something wrong with me. You feel it in your body. You feel like you've never felt it before. I've never been in shock before. So it was a new physical feeling. I felt like my head was going to pop off, and I felt like this knife was going through my head. So he took me to the hospital, and the minute the doctor saw me, the emergency room physician saw me, he already knew that I was in shock by the way I looked. I was white, and I was sweating and shaky. And he confirmed it when he took my blood pressure, that it was over 180. My blood pressure is usually 100 or 110 over 70. It shoots up, and you have no control over it.
Yeah.
Of course, being Jewish, then we bury our dead the next day. So I'm in North Carolina. It was a terrible 2-day trip to get there. And I get this shocking news at midnight. When I got back from the hospital to the cabin, my girls, my daughters, found their way, and they came in screaming. They were in shock too. Mom, Pammy's dead, Pammy's dead, Pammy's dead, screaming. And I, for some reason, I had to shift in that moment because I had my 2 daughters, and I couldn't be screaming. I had to go into mother mode. And it's amazing how we have this ability to be able to rise above what was a shocking experience only moments ago, only hours ago, and I was calm. I don't know why my dog is barking, but anyway, anyway, you have this amazing, miraculous experience. Now I was there for my daughters to calm them down and to make them feel more comfortable. I held them in my arms. Anyway, somebody must be at the door. That's the only thing I can imagine. But anyway, she usually stops by now. I don't want to lose my train of thought. So I went into this mother mode, and they said, we have to leave. We got tickets for you to go back to Miami. And I said, I can't. I'm in shock. And they said, but you seem fine. I said, that's because you're here. Believe me, I'm not fine. And I had 2 days of a horrendous experience, and I can't go. I can't go tonight. I'll go the first thing in the morning, and I'll get there. It's only an hour and a half flight from I think it was Charlotte to Fort Lauderdale.
Mm-hmm.
So I pulled myself together, and I managed to. They were pleading with me to go. I said, I can't get on a flight now. I'm in shock, and I won't make it. I just won't be able. I can't do it. I knew my limitations.
Yeah.
And I went the next morning, and so the shock lasted overnight. It lasted 24 hours, but the doctor wanted to give me a tranquilizer. And I said, I got to get up at 6 in the morning, and I won't be able to do it if you give me a tranquilizer. And he gave me some to take in case I needed it. And I never took, I very rarely took sedatives. So I managed to get on that flight in the morning. And then from that point on, you move into another stage of grief, which is like denial. This can't happen. This couldn't happen. It's impossible that this happened. And she's not dead. I can't believe my daughter is dead. So there's now denial isn't different for people who lose a loved one than it is for a person who's got a terminal illness, because they don't want to believe that they're going to die when they have a terminal illness. So they'll deny. Are you sure? I'm going to go for another opinion. I don't believe you. Denial is more prevalent in terminally ill people than it is in the griever. For me, she was dead. I saw her dead body. I went to the funeral, but I just couldn't accept it in my mind that she could be here one day and gone, and no note, nothing. That's what made me believe it was her illness. So you move into denial. I can't believe it. And then pretty soon you move into depression. And then you move into anger. Why did this have to happen? And then you finally go into acceptance. The one thing that didn't happen to me was the bargaining. That happens to people who are dying, who are admitted, who have terminal illness. They bargain, just let me live long enough to see my daughter's wedding. Let me live long enough, to just see the baby, whatever. But I had nothing to bargain with. She was already dead. So I missed that stage.
Yeah.
Anyway, so those are the 5 stages. But shock is a physical experience. It's not mental, it's not emotional. You are completely out of control.
Yeah,
Some
definitely. And after having experiences, having your daughter pass like that, jumping out of a window, I imagine it's crazy crucial having your child pass away, more than anything, having it happen not through her choice but through her sickness. But how did you come up from it? What motivated you to keep moving? Was it your children? Was it how did you go from the grief and really push forward?
That's another great question, because some people get stuck in grief for years and they never get over it. I could have spent the rest of my life seeing the video of her jumping out the window, because I did. I mean, I saw that. I couldn't imagine how she would throw herself 15 stories. So there comes a time that you have choices. We all have choices. You either are, a victim of this, you have a choice to become a survivor, or you can do what I did, which was really, it was kind of like the phoenix, the mythological bird that rises from the ashes to become stronger. So I went to a grief group with other parents who had lost their children. And some of them were there for 20 years. And I made a decision after the 4th or 5th time, this is not going to be me. I'm not going to be grieving for 20 years like this, crying every time they talked about it. And I had 4 other children, and I had to focus on them. They weren't young, but they were not old either. They were not yet adult children. Some of them
Yeah.
they were passing from teenagers to adult. They were in their 20s. And so I had to deal with their feelings and their grief. So I had to be present for them in order
Mm-hmm.
to stay connected, because our brains are hardwired for connection. And when we go into a disconnect, we go into crisis. This I know because I deal with couples, and when they go into a disconnect, whether it's divorce or separation, or they have some kind of a disaster that happens, they lose connection. And so many of them did during the pandemic, by the way. So losing connection means you go into crisis. And also you go through sometimes shock. So I knew that because I'm a therapist, maybe that was my answer, that I had the wherewithal to be able to think it through, because there is a space between stimuli and response. It's called think. It's taking the elevator from this part of your brain, the reptilian, which is really the most primitive part of the brain, where we, fight or flight, and
Mm-hmm.
taking it up to the limbic system, where the seat of the emotions. And then understanding that I was in grief. I recognized it, I acknowledged it. And then I went up to the neocortex, which is the thinking, the computer that lives here. And I had to make a decision. Am I going to be a victim? Am I going to be a survivor? Or am I going to be a phoenix? And I didn't even think of the word phoenix. It just came to me. And I thought, I don't know. But anyway, when you're grieving, you're nocturnal. You don't sleep well.
Mm-hmm.
Never slept. I mean, I don't know how I managed to go to work every morning and see 18 to 20 people a week, take care of these kids. They were already out of the house. They were in college. And, to survive, more than survive. So there is this part of me, and it's in everybody, not just me. It's if anybody have seen Star Wars, they would know about Yoda, the wise old man that lives inside. Star Wars was about everybody's parts. I mean, George Lucas must have done the work that I do, parts work, because we all have a Darth Vader, we all have a Luke Skywalker, and we all have a wise old woman, a wise old man that lives in us. And in my case, it was a muse. And she, that part of me, compelled me to go to the computer and write, just journal. I was journaling and journaling. I was journaling for 7 years and going to work and seeing my children and managing, just managing and getting by and doing okay. Going through all of Pam's things and her letters and her journal herself, talking to her friends and the people that knew her well. More than 1,000 people showed up to her funeral. But anyway, this muse was 𝗵𝗲𝗹𝗶𝗹𝘀. She was my lifesaver. She put me in front of the computer, and I'm 81 years old, so I was born way too soon for computers. Somehow I learned on DOS, believe it or not, by myself. So it's amazing what you can do when you have to do something.
Definitely.
And I started writing. I just started just discharging whatever was inside, and I don't even know what I was doing. My fingers were just lingering over the keyboard, and my heart was giving the messages. I wasn't even aware consciously of what I was writing, just pouring it out. And I did that for about 6 or 7 years, and I never stopped. I don't even know how many pages I wrote in the computer, but it was more than a couple hundred. And then at the end, when I started to have nothing else to say, because I had emptied my soul onto the computer, which put it on the monitor, which then saved it, in a file. I just had this thought, gee, this could help so many other people who are going through the struggle, the tragedies that I went through. My experience, because I was writing my experience as it was happening, I was doing it as if it was a trajectory of grief, because it has different stages. And so I was writing what I was experiencing. And when it was over, I said, this could be a book. Anyway, nobody was interested in publishing it. No commercial publishing company was interested. I tried. So I decided to self-publish it. And then, of course, when you self-publish it, you have to learn how to pitch it, do marketing, which was out of my lexicon altogether. But I did a couple of things, and I got a strange thing happened, a very weird thing. I got a call one day while all my kids were at my house. They were all watching football, and it was loud. The kids were yelling and screaming because the Dolphins were playing, which is our team. And this woman calls me, and she asked me, is this Joan Childs? And I said, yes, it is. My name is Mary Gleason, and I want to make a movie out of your book. I was like, what? Who is this? What are you talking about? Anyway, she sent me a contract. They were going to make a movie. They still haven't made it, but they're still in the middle of trying. They have finally got the actors. They got the money. It takes years to do a movie. So now they're going to do it on Netflix, from what I understand. Still hasn't been put out yet. But once I got the contract, I said, I'm going to go now. I'm going to go to a commercial publishing company and see if they'd be interested. And of course they were. And at that time I had already been on Oprah, which gave me a little more credibility as somebody that could just, put something out that could be worthwhile, credentialed me. So basically, it's about choices. You can stay in grief and you can become a victim of this tragedy easily. I have clients that have flown in from all over the country to see me, to do the grief work. And I've helped many of them, but there were some that I couldn't reach. They had a investment, for whatever reason, psychologically, in staying committed to the grief, because I guess a lot of them felt that they would feel that their child was abandoned by them. Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure if that's accurate, but it's been told to me by some of them. And I have a girlfriend who, very close, who lost her daughter, not through suicide, but through breast cancer. And that's been 4 years now. And I've tried to coach her and help her. she's invested in the death of her daughter as if nothing else matters. And she had 4 children, grown children. So there are different strokes for different folks, basically. We all have a way of processing
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
tragedy and even, and even joy. Uh,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
but basically, what I want your folks that are listening to hear is that you do have a choice. You don't have to be a victim of this. There's old adages, you have a cascade of feelings. There's no question, a cascade of emotions like a waterfall coming down on you. You don't even, sometimes they're not even separate. Sometimes you're angry, sometimes you're sad, sometimes you're depressed. It can all be at one time. It's a cascade of different emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually there's life. You've got other things to live for. And that doesn't mean you abandon your deceased child. Look what, I don't know if your viewers know about Sandy Hook Elementary School, which was a horrible tragedy about 5 years ago. Little children, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. There was a massacre. They were shot and killed. Those parents got together and created a foundation, and they became very, very well known all over the internet in terms of gun control. So they took a negative and they turned it into a positive. 2 years ago, or three, now I remember 2 years ago, my two of my grandchildren went to a high school, Marjorie Douglas, and a shooter came in and shot 17 of their schoolmates. So that was another tragedy for me. Fortunately, my kids weren't killed, but they suffered. They suffered grief and loss because their classmates, 17 of their classmates, had been shot to death.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm still working with my grandchildren on that a little bit to try to help them overcome, because children can't believe, adults have a more mature developed brain to be able to recognize what happened, but children cannot recognize it. So they have a different kind of grief.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make that distinction.
No,
I'm
yeah,
sorry I kept
definitely.
rambling, but any questions, please. Just going to take a sip of water after all that.
Yeah, go for it. No, so yeah, so I love how you use those motivating factors of responsibility and your children depending on you to push forward, and you started writing. And it's definitely is a choice. It's something that you feel that it is a choice that they can choose to be the victim, the survivor, or the phoenix, like you said that, and I love that. And I wanted, before we jump off, I did want you to share, because I know for that, which will possibly even help them decide if they want to be the victim, the survivor, or the phoenix. I wanted to share, I know you have something for them, a little free goodie for them that will help them in that process as well. So if you want to share that as well.
I mean, the gift that I have, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, because I was able to morph my pain into purpose and passion, I want to get the stigma of shame out of mental illness. I have offered one free session, a grieving session, a grief session, with anyone that would want to have something like that, for me to be able to help facilitate the loss and the grief that you're going through, whoever they might be. And so I put my email on there, primarily because I'm technically impaired and I couldn't figure out how to create a link, but the email is fine. And you can go on my website also, and that you can get the email through that, or my telephone number. I am all over the internet. So
Yeah. No, and I'll definitely be providing you guys that link as well. I'll give you the link to her website so you can go in and contact her on her contact page and reach out to her in case that's something you want to do, so you can get the help to choose how you want to go about this. So I really appreciate you offering them that. I'm sure they appreciate it as well. Very much so. And I appreciate you sharing your story and sharing the way you came out of it, because I know a lot of people can relate and will be able to see the way you walked out of that, or were able to become the phoenix, right? And will inspire them to try to be that phoenix as well. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and being open and really offering that gift to all the viewers so that they can have that opportunity.
well, one thing that really helped me that I'll share with everybody is, by helping others, I help myself.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a big
Yeah,
one too.
very
I
big.
think I think that's something that you hear often. Helping others will help you heal yourself, and that's huge, right? And I think that's what you did with writing your book and all that. When you would do all that stuff, you're putting yourself out there to help others, and it's really heals you as well.
Right, right. That was major for me.
Definitely, that's beautiful. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us on this interview series.
Oh, Laura, it was my
Again, I know
pleasure.
everyone appreciated it very much.
It's my pleasure, Laura. It was a pleasure to meet with you, and I'm glad. I hope that I can be helpful and useful to other people who are listening. Who
I'm
want.
sure. And like I said, I'm gonna put you guys that link to her website so you guys can contact her for that psychotherapy session. That way you can become that phoenix. All
Yes.
right. Thank you guys so much for watching From Morning to Meaning. Bye. Have a good one.